This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska.
Boy, it seems like we've been here before already, but folks, welcome back to the Hunt Nebraska cabin, and we appreciate wherever you might be listening to us, whether you're taking us on a ride down the road, sitting in your office, out in the field, getting ready to do some fun stuff over a weekend or weekday. We appreciate being there along with you. Real quick, behind Mission Control today, we've got Hunter Nikolai, our Hunter Education Coordinator for the entire state of Nebraska. Over here, stage right, left, depending on where you're listening from, I guess. That's Michael Addison, our shared position with the National Wild Turkey Federation. He is the Nebraska R3 for hunting and shooting sports coordinator. So welcome, guys. Welcome back. It's good to be back here. This one's going to be a quick one because we're just kind of sneaking this in before a lot of things happen. And Hunter, I got to assume your life's getting busier and busier.
It's picking up these days. Our hunter ed instructors are scheduling classes. We've got meetings coming up. It's a good time of the year, though.
Business is starting to boom. I mean, when does it peak? I assume it just gets busier and busier and busier.
Yeah, I think most number of classes probably peaks late September, early October, but right now instructors are starting to schedule their classes, so we've got to get them all their classroom supplies shipped out to them. Any educational materials, firearms, ammunition, dummy ammunition, whatever they need for their class, getting all that squared away now, and then even here in August.
So they can run when
classes
happens,
start starting. They're starting, then they have already started, and they go all year round, but really the peak of them starts in August and through November firearm season. So
I was going to say we are just days away from the start of school here in the state of Nebraska, which just seems like crazy in my mind that we're starting in mid-August, but it is what it is. And so I think a lot of folks start thinking a little bit more fall. The weather might not feel like it, but once you get back into classes and back into the swing of that routine for those of us that do have kids in the house, or classes if you're a college student listening to us, the same thing. You're kind of getting that idea, all right. It might not officially say on the calendar, Michael, that summer's over, but it kind of feels that way.
Yeah, I think Labor Day is the unofficial end of summer, and that's coming up here in almost a month, so we're getting pretty close.
But it's always interesting, too. This is the time of the year the mind starts to wander, and I think in nature you start seeing a shift as well, as a lot of those young of the year start to venture out a little bit more. If they're, of the species that mom and dad kind of take care of them, they're a little bit more free now and independent happening. And I bring that up because once again, folks, as we record this just a day before, we, the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, have confirmed a mountain lion sighting in Southwest Omaha. Now, do you guys live in nicer places than I do? Do you have those doorbells and security systems where you have cameras that are looking out?
I do, but I barely look at it, so if a mountain lion went running by, I probably wouldn't even see it. So,
are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, Hunter? I was going to say, if it wasn't for those type of doorbells, I'm not sure YouTube would have as many videos as they do of fun things happening.
It would be a much more boring place.
Yeah, do you have one at your place?
I do not, no.
I recorded when I proposed to Tammy, was recorded on a Ring camera.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that planned?
Kinda. Not really. It was kind of a spur of the moment, Just happened to be there.
We're getting to know a little bit more about you, Hunter.
I've used them a time or two, not to capture lions, but I've seen foxes chasing rabbits on them before.
Well, see, there's some neat things going on besides just the porch pirates that we all love to hate. But I think that's what went on again here. 4:15 a.m., July 24th, near Interstate 80 and Q Street. There was a home security system video that caught a mountain lion moving through, which sounds like, wow, what's going on now? Folks, if you think back to 2022, we had a doorbell that captured an image of a mountain lion passing through the capital city of Lincoln on July the 20th, I believe it was. So it must just be time to kind of get out there of the age, both of them young males, is what I believe we've been told. I know the one last year was, because that one made history. Not only did they have a GPS collar on so we could track it, but it made it all the way to, now I think it's residing in Indiana. It made it to Illinois before it was captured. The one in Omaha, I'm not officer that has any color to my knowledge. Maybe by the time this airs, we'll know a little bit more, but we are keeping an eye on that. The young males, generally prone to wandering, just because, that's what young males do. And we're going to kind of get into that here in just a bit as we talk a little bit more hunting. But that's kind of an interesting thing. A big, large mammal like that, large carnivore game animal here in the state of Nebraska. Now our population's obviously getting bigger, and some of those young males are looking for new territory. But we're going to see if there's more reports coming up, or if he's just going to keep wandering east and go meet his buddy in Indiana now, or if he's going to head back west, north, south. It's hard to tell with these things. But talking about moving around, you guys have done some moving in the last 4 or 5 years, and some of you just months ago. Now, Hunter, how long have you been a Nebraskan?
Official resident or been in Nebraska?
It's a Nebraskan by choice today,
it's
folks.
been almost 2 years, just under 2 years.
Under 2 years.
Yeah.
All right, and for you, Michael?
What is today? Today's July 26th, so just a little shy of 5 months.
Just a little shy of 5 months. And you guys both, where you came from, hunted, right? I mean, that's part of what got your interest going and in the positions you guys are now in.
Yep.
But when you move that big and move, cross state, and in this case, cross state borders, when you get into the hunting swing of things in that new area, it's a little bit different. It's almost like you're brand new to it. Yeah, you still have some experience and you can draw on that knowledge. And, white-tailed deer in Missouri, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska is somewhat similar, but some of the regulations are not. Season dates obviously aren't. Methods of take can be quite different, all that type of stuff. So you guys got to relearn that in the last few years. So we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit as we go through some of this stuff. And we know, Hunter, because, you've told us, you've drawn an out-of-state bear tag.
Yep.
And we're going to have to dive into that. Have you ever bear hunted before?
First time. So this will be my first bear hunt.
You're learning again.
I am. I actually I drew a Wisconsin bear tag, so I'd been, a resident before putting in. They have a preference point system, similar to the way many states manage their bear populations, but I drew after 11 years of preference points finally. So.
Wow, 11 years. That's stick-to-itness, I think is what they would call that. So before we get too far, give us an idea, both of you, what you were hunting, what your experiences were before you became Nebraskans. Michael, since it's most recent in your memory, we'll give Hunter a little time to think about it, because a lot of life changes have happened to Hunter since he moved here. Marriage, first kid, all that type of stuff. Took a new job even after he got here, so it's a little bit more fresh in your mind. So what did you do back home?
Mainly deer and turkey, just a small little bit of small game. Opportunities for pheasant and quail and things like that in northwest Missouri aren't nearly as great as they are up here in Nebraska. Pretty limited habitat, pretty limited populations. Where I lived at home, wasn't a whole lot of waterfowl guys around. Not a lot of people waterfowl hunted or dove hunted. Deer and turkey were the real big main thing. So that's pretty much what I did too, kind of like everyone else. That's what the habitat was best for, and that's what most everyone did.
So in Missouri, similar to some spots in Wisconsin, did you ever get schools shut down so you could go deer hunting?
There were some way kind of down in the middle part and the southern part of the state, areas that were more rural, or even where I was at. I grew up in a pretty rural area, but unfortunately the first day of deer season was not a state holiday for our school district. I wish the first day of turkey season was, that would have been nice, or they could have at least had it on a Saturday. But as I've griped about a couple of times now on the Hunt Nebraska podcast, turkey season opens on a Monday in Missouri, so never got to hunt that opening day either. But Missouri opener is always on a Saturday. So
you were out of school.
Of school. Yep. And it's usually right there around when Veterans Day is, or the week after. So
deer and turkey with a little bit of small game squirrel mixed in there.
Just a little.
What about you, Hunter?
Very similar. I grew up deer hunting, turkey hunting, small game, rabbit, squirrel, pretty much. Again, limited pheasant opportunities in Wisconsin. Mostly all the pheasant are stocked, and then most of the other upland game birds are up in the north woods in Wisconsin. So you got, which I grew up in southern Wisconsin, so there really wasn't as much of that opportunity, but I grew up white-tailed deer hunting, turkey hunting,
No.
They were more, when I grew up, it was more event based. We'd go up for hunt camp for the deer season for about a week, and the same thing for in the spring turkey season. Wisconsin's turkey seasons are week long seasons that you get drawn for. So that was more limited too. So kind of more of event based versus we're continually, I'm going out hunting this day or that day. So that's been the biggest change for me is, I can, with some of the more liberal seasons here in Nebraska, turkey, obviously archery deer is similar in Wisconsin, but been getting out a little bit more maybe, but,
after work, just got a half morning off or something.
Just kind of doing it here and there.
Interesting perspective. Now, in my mind, I snuck over near your old stomping grounds, at least for deer. Now you're going to tell me, boy, that's hours away. But waterfowl, either one of you guys waterfowl? Because the spot I was in your old state, Hunter, a bunch of ducks and geese, and even sandhill cranes.
Yeah, no, I never did it. My dad didn't do it. Nobody in the family did it, or had the equipment to do it, certainly, because we hunted with shotguns primarily and slugs growing up, but never got into waterfowl until after college here. So here recently in the past few years.
All right.
I've never been waterfowl hunting. My dad's the one that's got me into all the hunting I've done, and he didn't do it. None of my buddies growing up did it. So really, my area, not a lot of. There's the occasional duck or goose hunter, but even a lot of those guys around home, they went to other spots, not necessarily within Harrison County, Missouri.
Which is kind of interesting because one of the regulars on Hunt Nebraska, obviously, folks, is Jeff Rawlinson, who's not here today. He's at a archer conference. But, he drives to Missouri to chase snow geese.
Mound City.
I know that area is pretty well known even in the fall time for some waterfowl action. But obviously you're a little further away from the river and that stuff.
Yeah, so Mound City where Jeff goes, that's about an hour and 45 minutes from where I grew up, about straight west almost.
Okay.
So, yeah, and that's a big waterfowl area. I know there's a lot of guys down in the southeast part of the state that are big waterfowl guys too. But just where I grew up, you'd see ducks and stuff at the county lake, and even every once in a while out of my grandparents' farm, which is pretty much where I've done most of my hunting. You'd occasionally see a few wood ducks flying around out in the back of the timber there. There's a little pond back there. A lot of Canada geese will fly overhead a lot, but never really took the opportunity to shoot a few out of the sky. So I'm sure that's going to change here moving up to Nebraska and being around some more waterfowl hunters.
Folks, if anything, one of the things I'm stressing more and more is take advantage of those opportunities that you have. You might not even realize they're there, but opportunities are never more present than they are right now. Now, Hunter, Michael kind of mentioned a couple of things he's kind of intrigued by here in Nebraska. When you first got here, what are some of the hunting opportunities that popped out at you? Boy, that's different. I want to try it.
I think turkey hunting. I had been a turkey hunter, but I think the different aspects of turkey hunting here in Nebraska and maybe some of the different subspecies and different styles of hunting turkeys is just a different strategy, I think, here than back in the north woods of Wisconsin where you're hunting hardwoods all the time.
Well, isn't that kind of neat? You get out here to the Great Plains and you can see the turkeys.
Right.
They're visible. We're in those woods. I'm guessing you could hear them, but if they weren't talking, they'd almost like they were not even existent.
Yeah, you can hear them for a ways. They echo in those woods, but you don't see them sometimes till they're right there. So it's a little bit different of a hunt and different experience.
More anxiety.
You got to make that decision a little bit quicker than maybe you do here, where you see them in an open prairie or open field.
It's a thing that kind of cuts both ways. Is if you can see them, they can obviously see you. Mm-hmm. But I will say it is interesting. I know, and you talk about big woods, I know there's turkeys here in Nebraska that get hunted successfully each year and harvested at times that in those more wooded states, Missouri, Wisconsin, where have you, one, you wouldn't even think about probably sitting down and calling them because you didn't know they were there. They'd be 2 ridges over and 2 ridges over on those hardwood forests. It might as well be a mile away. Till you get on their ridge, it's probably a done deal. But you see them. 200, 300, 400 yards. Sometimes you can call them across some of the open pasture ground or through the hills and along the river bottom. Just a little bit more likely to cross that opening. Plus, if you know they're there, you're more likely to sit tight and watch what they do rather than when you don't know, which is kind of interesting. So turkey was one of the big ones, huh?
Yeah, and mule deer at some point. I haven't done it yet. Like you said, I've got in a new marriage with a new kid and a busy life right now. I think those opportunities will come in the next couple of years too. So getting prepared for it.
Now, you mentioned hunting deer with shotgun. That's what you used in the area that you hunted in Wisconsin. That's not a statewide.
No, that's area where I hunted on an island. So
now have you taken advantage of a rifle, during the deer season here in Nebraska in November?
This will be my first because I just got a rifle because growing up, I never really needed a rifle and took care of everything with a shotgun. So I got a Frankie that actually won at a DU banquet. You were there, and I'm going to use that for the bear hunt too, a 6.5 Creedmoor chamber.
Oh wow,
that's quite the rifle for your first deer rifle.
Yeah, so
I know.
Getting it dialed in, got a scope on it. So
I also, Michael, grew up in a spot with shotguns. That was all you could use for deer. Mm-hmm. And man, you walked in the gun store and it was all shotguns with a few, 22 rim fires and maybe a couple of other deer rifles. That was it. I mean, they just didn't sell a lot of them because you couldn't use them. And I remember how much thought, not necessarily that I wanted to, but how much input is a better term, that I got once folks realized I was trying to buy my first big game caliber center fire rifle.
Yeah.
Something for deer and a cow elk tag that I was lucky enough to draw here early on in Nebraska. And it was every person I talked to or gave their input, the more confused I got at times about their favorite one. And I came up with the idea that if you want 6 different opinions, all you got to do is ask 4 deer hunters about what rifle to choose, because they're going to give you at least one of theirs and somebody else's opinion.
The options are endless.
It is. And I knew I had to kind of go on the lower end. Happy with what I've got. I've never taken a deer with it, folks. Other folks have. They've shot in Minnesota a black bear with it as well. But I haven't taken anything with it. But what ended up making my mind, it came down to the 308, a 270. There was a lot of obviously push for the 30-06 and all that stuff. I think I was headed to Shields that day. And I can't remember, stopped by the gas station to get, a snack, a fountain soda and a bag of chips or something like that. And it rang up as $3.08.
Well, so I think that settled it.
Somebody on a higher order is telling me what to get, and it's been a darn nice rifle for those folks that have used it. But now, where you were deer hunting, center fire rifle, shotgun, what were you using?
Center fire rifles. My first deer rifle was if anybody out there has ever heard of the Rossi trifectas, so it's one of those kind of put together. It's one of those 3-in-1 guns where you got the 22. Mine was a 20 gauge shotgun, but they make them in 410 and other such. And then a 243 rifle. That was my first deer rifle. It was a little break open single shot 243. That's what I've killed my first deer with, and then now I use a Savage 25-06.
Okay,
so
25-06.
Little bit different, but yeah.
Now, again, growing up where we could only use shotguns, I thought, I kept being told how easy it was to get deer with a rifle. So I figured, Hunter, that it was like a video game that, make sure there's only this deer in the field, because as soon as I pull the trigger, anything in the cornfield is going to die type thing. I found out you actually have to aim those things. And I found out all my shotgun training and all my years breaking blue rock didn't translate to a nice, crisp rifle trigger pull. I mean, even the shotguns I used deer hunting growing up had, shotgun triggers. I mean, they were terrible.
Yep,
super heavy, creep, and then you start sweating so much, I gotta let down. This is the suspense is killing me.
Is it ever gonna break?
And then pretty soon you're just I'm just gonna slap that trigger. That's the only way it's going off.
Yep, I think there's some truth to.
So have you been practicing with the rifle then?
Yeah, I got out once with it. I've got to get out more, and I plan to get out more, but we're headed out in August to do a little bit of scouting, meeting with the guide who's been baiting for us and stuff like that. So I'm gonna bring.
Oh, see,
I'm gonna bring the crossbow too, because it's kind of it's an open tag. I could use pretty much whatever legal method to take I want. So I might one day I might start out with the crossbow and then go to the. I don't know. We'll see. We'll
see if he has a divine sign on what to use that day.
I need some type of sign to know by then.
Better go to the gas station, Hunter. hunter.
Yep. You need to get the munchies. One of the beauties, I love those tags that you're able to choose what method to use. We've got them here in Nebraska. Obviously, our turkey tag. I love that. You buy a spring turkey tag, you buy a fall turkey tag, and you get to decide what you're going to use. And dates obviously play into that. But I know where I had to choose between one or the other. You're going to be an archery turkey hunter this spring or a shotgun turkey hunter this spring. Kind of didn't like making that decision. I like having those options. Deer, one of my favorite is the statewide whitetail buck permit.
Yep.
So I can use that archery, muzzleloader. Don't get often out with rifle, but you can do that until it's filled type thing, which is pretty darn cool. But bear hunting, have you ever bear hunted?
I have not.
Have you ever thought about bear hunting?
Missouri opened up a black bear season a few years ago, and I, kind of thought that'd be kind of neat to do, but I never put in for any draws or anything on it. I don't even know if there's preference points for black bear season down there. It might just be a strict lottery draw for that, and I think it's like 5 tags down there.
5 tags, so it's pretty limited.
It's pretty limited. The bear reintroduction only started about 10, 15 years ago, I think, and they started a season down there maybe five or so years ago.
So, if you were still a resident of that state of Wisconsin, how often could you declare yourself a bear hunter? It's not going to take a dozen years like it did this go around.
It depends on where you want to hunt. So the northern, I think they're split into 6 zones. The northern zones being the most abundant bear population, and then kind of as you get south, less abundance. But they are over time, expanding their population there to the south.
Really?
But,
okay.
The top 2 zones, A and B zone in the northern Wisconsin, one in every 11 or 12 years. Right now, it's probably going to get worse. Maybe one in every 15 by the time I draw again, or more. Who knows? But some of the southern zones you could draw every year, but your success rates looks like. I think the harvest success rates are like less than 10% in some of those zones, so there's not as many bears. So.
Oh yeah. So do you know any bear hunters? Obviously, you've got somebody you're working with now.
When I worked for the Wisconsin DNR, I knew some. The guy that we're going with is through family. We know him through family friends. So he's a accepted and ethical bear vader guide. You got to have a guiding license to guide bear in Wisconsin.
Oh, really? Okay.
So they operate a little bit differently, but it's kind of like a religion up there. There's 2 main ways to do it. You're either hunting over bait or you're hunting with dogs. And
so you bring this up. What isn't a religion in Wisconsin?
I don't know. It depends where you are in the state.
Packers,
I think there's
bears, beer,
only certain
brats.
I think Brewers baseball might not be anymore. Sorry to any Brewers fans I might have just offended, but
when Wisconsinites get it behind something, they really get behind something.
But it's even. I mean, even with that, the baiters versus the dog hunters,
the non-baiters. You got to be careful. This is a family podcast here, Hunter. He's not a master at it, folks. He's just really good at it.
Each year they alternate who gets to hunt the first week first. So this year, if you're hunting with dogs, you get to hunt the opening week, and then it opens to everything. And then next year it'll be the opposite. And if you're hunting over bait, you get to hunt that first week without anybody running dogs.
That's an interesting strategy.
So it's kind of helps mediate some of the
interaction.
The interaction, I think, or dogs running up on those hunting over bait, and not the vice versa, really. But
now my good friend Rich Gerbitz has hunted black bear in Minnesota, and he's the one that got to use my 308. And that baiting, it's different. I mean, there are people that really get into it. It's almost, I guess it's like everything else that us guys can get involved with. We take it to the nth degree. Yep. Having these secret mixtures and additives and things like that. But what is interesting is I've done some trips north with fishing rod just as much as with shotgun. Is you start seeing some of these bakeries and stores offering up, day-old bread and donuts and sweets and bear bait additives on their signs out front. So I assume it's similar in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of sweets, baked items. I know when my dad went, he's been bear hunting before. He hunted with dogs, but they still set up bait sites with sand so they can, get on a bear first
quickly. Okay.
And one of my dad's good friends worked for Little Debbie, so they brought up bought up a couple truckloads of bait for all summer to bait.
Just dump out a bunch of bear claws for the bears.
First of all, I'm relearning who you are, Hunter. This is a connection you need to bring out a lot sooner, because I was going to say if it wasn't for Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies, I would not eat healthy at all in the tree stand with my bow and arrow. I mean, that right there, having an oatmeal breakfast.
All they got to do is fix their crinkly little wrappers, and they've got to.
That's true. They need silent packaging.
Yeah.
I figured if you do it just right, it either sounds like really small deer fighting or squirrels.
So you could probably make it sound like a squirrel running through the underbrush there, and they wouldn't think anything of it.
But we're going to have to take advantage of this. We didn't know you had friends and friends of friends in such high places.
Apparently not. But this is one of the sending. I think I showed you this, Hershey. That's one of the bears on camera.
He's eating a zebra cake. I can see it.
Oh, yep.
But they've got strict regulations on your bait's got to be concealed, so only a bear can get it. That you can't have any animal parts or animal byproducts. So there are rules. They don't advise chocolate, because I know there's some studies that show
chocolate's bad.
Potentially, that chocolate's bad for bears. But it's certainly strictly regulated, but it is very popular. I think the one growing season in Wisconsin, I think there was over 130,000 applicants this year for either a tag or a point, and
wow,
12,000 drew a tag. So. And of those 12,000, I think there's like a 1 in 3 success rate statewide. So maybe 4,000 will shoot a bear. So
are there limits on non-resident draws, like number of tags that are issued to non-residents?
No, there aren't limits, but it's the same preference point system. So I started preference points when I was a Wisconsin resident, and I had for zone. I pulled the stats here just to kind of zone B, which has I think a 56% harvest success rate last year in the zone I'm hunting.
Nice.
Minimum of 11 points to draw this year. I had 11 points, and then of those applicants with the minimum points, only 9% drew. So I was 1 of 9%, and I am and only 36 non-resident tags for zone B in the entire state, and I'm one of those. So it's kind of interesting to see all the data they put out, kind of like we do with our draws, and Luke Meduna does a good job putting that out for deer.
But and that just popped in my head. I know there's a lot listening here that probably put in for a tag, whether it's pronghorn or a mule deer or elk, or maybe even bought a super tag option or trying to get one of those fortunate other special tags. And we put in, and about a month later or a month and a half, we have a good idea whether we got it or not. So there's a pretty quick turnaround. Seems to me like you knew you drew this sometime back.
I think they notified in February.
And when did you apply?
And I think December 10th is the cutoff to apply for the following year.
December, and you found out in February for a hunt that's happening in September.
Yep.
So a little bit more lead time.
Yeah, I think most people, unless you live up there and reside up there, are gonna hire either at least a guide to bait for you or a fully guided hunt, just because it is a once in X amount of years hunt for most people, probably once in a lifetime hunt.
And this is interesting. I know that some folks, including myself, bait is one of those things, a true 4-letter word, and just not often done or not able to be done for various reasons. This one here is a little bit different. I think it gets back to the difference, again, being in the North Woods with a bunch of trees and being out in the open area of a place like Nebraska, where those woods are thick.
Yeah, I think and even with the bait, I think sometimes they can be so quiet and sneaky that unless you're watching that bait pile, they might come in and leave without you even noticing. But yeah, they're dense hardwood forests and pine wood, forests up there that, you got to have shooting lanes. You got to have a good spot where you can see, and they're certainly hard to hunt without the aid of bait or dogs. Some people do it, but...
And like you said, I think some of them get to learn where, if there is a hunter there, where they sit or where the humans are, and they kind of keep an eye on them. And sometimes they get in and get out of there, like you said, not only undetected at times, but oftentimes, or I shouldn't say often, but times where they never present a decent enough shot.
Yeah.
Especially if you're archery hunting or compound bow, crossbow, whatever it might be.
Yep.
Walk straight in, straight out.
Yeah, and we'll be Well, that's part of the reason we're going to go up there. We're going to, check out all the different sites, stands, blinds. So there's just a few different options for us and different spots we're going to be able to go to, and then probably put something out that has our scent on it so they get used to that scent there. So
there's more to it then.
So when we show
Sounds
up
like
there
it's a
on
complicated
the
affair.
13th, they're maybe more used to that. We'll see what the guide wants to do, but he's.
Wouldn't that be interesting, guide? It would require a deposit and a set of your clothes. The sweatier you've been in them, don't wash them. Just send them to us. Just that gets a little different.
I'm gonna need a few $1,000s and the last pair of clothes you mowed the lawn in about the middle of July.
I mean, you think about it. There, if you're baiting regularly for the bear to visit this site regularly, and there's multiple bait sites because they're probably not going to visit one, or all sites aren't going to be actively hunted. But if you've got a bear coming in and then they smell that whoever's placing the bait, but then you got a hunter come in later and they get a different whiff of something they don't recognize, I think is the idea that it's different. They're not used to it.
I wonder if we could do that for deer.
I've got a theory. I was fortunate enough in 2 spots of my very first buck that I ever harvested. And then one of the biggest deer I've ever seen and did not harvest on 2 different separate pieces of ground, probably 100 miles apart. But both of them had something in common, and that was the owners would walk the entire area. We're not talking, hundreds of acres. It was probably, one is 40 acres. I know the other one's probably 80 or something like that. But avid walkers, cross-country skiers, hikers, whatever, and they would walk the entire property every day. Sometimes twice a day. And I got to the idea, Michael, that deer just after a while realize they're staying on the same path, same trails every day. They get to see the same people, they get to hear the same noises, they get to smell the same scent every day, and pretty soon they know that person's probably not a lot of danger. One was a gal. She'd take her dog with her, and it's probably the only time I've ever been in deer hunting clothes, folks, and made sure I petted the dog before I went out there. And this young buck came right up behind me, downwind, all that type of stuff, and just could have cared less that I was there. I accredit it to not the youth of the deer, tenderness perhaps, but because I petted the dog. The other one happens to be my father-in-law's place, and he always would have deer. We'd do, where we grew up, it was common to do deer drives, and he'd always be the one seeing deer and seeing the big deer. And I think they just got used to him. Even during deer season, he wouldn't shoot those deer. He was a muzzleloader, waited later. But that said, I think they got used to his scent. Yeah. And so I tried to be by my father-in-law, not only because he's a good guy, but also because I knew the deer were kind of used to him. And one of the biggest deer I ever saw, I heard walking, and that deer was just walking, and he walked just at the same cadence that my father-in-law did. In fact, I thought it was Hank. And I went over, and as soon as he popped out of the woods, I said, "Hey, Hank," and I realized it was this monster. And at that time, that monster realized I was not Hank. And this was like a 15-yard encounter. Now, something that no one here in in Nebraska is going to, especially for a native Nebraskan, probably not going to appreciate, but you in the North Woods might in Wisconsin. I was in a blackberry patch. And it was such a thick, I was busting my way through, and I'd pause because I was kind of running out of breath, and that's where I stopped, and I could hear this going on. That deer, I never even really got a shot off at him because my gun is stuck down. I tried raising it. It's stuck on this blackberry, which is a raspberry bush. I'm poking myself. I'm just in panic mode. I could not get my gun up, and he just sauntered off. He ran a little faster once he realized. But anyway, so I agree. Scent can be huge. I never thought about putting my scent out there for him to get used to. But they're used to, the smell of diesel and the combines and the tractors rolling through and probably the trucks and farming around here. So I can assume they can acclimatize to some of that.
Yeah. No, but it'll be interesting. We're going for about a week, so hopefully have.
I love these things. I love, like you said, I used to go the opposite direction. Most of my hunting was done as convenience, walk out the back door, jump into the farm behind our house, that type of thing. Now it is a little bit more of an event, like you were talking about, hunt camp, doing this for a few days in a row. But just new hunting in itself, there's an appeal to it. you've got to kind of relearn what's going on or get a chance to learn a new environment. It might be something you've hunted before, but now I've got to learn where these critters are using or how they're using this different type of habitat and that type of stuff. You guys got to experience that as you're moving, or will, Michael, in your case, as you move to Nebraska. And so, Hunter, give us a little bit of guidance. Now that you've done it, what are some of the things that, if someone's new to hunting or to hunting Nebraska specifically, what are some of those things that you saw and was like, oh, wow,
yeah,
I wish I would have known that before?
I think I've learned over the past 2 years that, and obviously working for Game and Parks and having a, pretty good knowledge of all of our different opportunities and access helps, certainly, and you're aware of those, Michael. But I think knowing that those areas, open fields and waters, program lands, even public wildlife management areas aren't, in my experience, haven't been as busy or densely hunted as I thought they would be. So I think, and especially weekdays, if you're not hitting openers, I think you're going to do pretty well. Not running into other hunters, or at least hunting a property where there's not overrun by other hunters, which, to some, it depends on the hunter whether they like that or not. So I think that's the biggest thing I realized. And, coming from a state where I primarily hunted private lands growing up, did some public land hunting, but it was, short stints. I think that was my expectation, that everything was going to be crowded, and it really hasn't been in my experience.
Yeah, good point. I mean, where you grew up, Michael, when you talked or heard people talking about hunting on public ground, what was kind of the overall thought about it? Was it a positive thing? Was it, I'm going to avoid that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really kind of, not, I wouldn't say it was ever negative or positive, just kind of, if you just went and hunted there. I don't think there was a lot of negative or positive stigma associated with it. Where I grew up, most of the ground in the area was private. There's a state forest near, actually, just probably 5 or 6 miles from my house where I grew up, but we always had my grandparents' farm, and my dad knows some folks, and we'd always hunt their ground. So back home, I only ever hunted public ground once, and it's while I was at college, and it was finals week, and I didn't have any finals that day, and I was like, it's turkey season, so I'm going. I went over to a little 640-acre piece of public that was about 25 minutes away from the town where I went to school, and I went out there and hunted for a few hours in the morning, and saw a hen. That was about it. But yeah, there was nobody out there. Not a single person was there, and which it was during the week. It was like a Tuesday or something. But there's really not much of a stigma attached with it, just because where I grew up, there wasn't very much public ground. There were some spots here and there, but not a lot. But those who did hunt it, a lot of the folks who hunted it were out-of-state hunters coming in, whether they're hunting deer or turkey, and just coming and hunting in the area. So
I think the other thing for me, I bought a non-resident small game, hunt permit right away and habitat stamp, because you had to wait your 30 days to establish your residency. So by the time I was an established Nebraska resident 2 years ago, it was about November, early November, and at that point, most of the permits were gone. For the different zones. So I think that's one thing to take into consideration with, if you're moving to Nebraska, you moved here, make sure whether you're an established resident or not, and that timing could impact what permit availability is out there too. So just another thing to take into consideration. But
one of the things that really popped out to me, and somebody told me about this, and I did not believe them until I saw it in action, but you can oftentimes tell how the Nebraska Cornhusker football team is doing in the fall based on who's hunting on football Saturdays and who's not. When there's a lot of excitement in the program, and especially if it's a home game, there are some public areas not too far from where we're sitting, or some of the population centers that are almost void of any activity unless you're out there. And then there's the opposite on those Sundays or the non-football Saturdays, where those same spots are just got quite a few folks out there. So it's a football effect that will be interesting to see what happens this year. But I do think there's some unique opportunities on those public areas. Yeah. Which is really kind of cool opportunity. The
NRD grounds I found during turkey season are a nice little spot where there's, if there are people out there, they're usually fishing. And yeah, I went and hunted a few different NRD lands this past spring, and I don't think I ever encountered another hunter out there, and heard and saw a few birds when I was doing some scouting, and then just going out and about there. So the NRD lands, aside from the WMAs, are also good little spots to check out sometimes.
Oh, that's going to be cool. We're going to have to put a fork in it here real soon, folks. But real quick, Michael, what would you say the one thing, and I know this is popping the question on you pretty fast, biggest change between where you came from and Nebraska as far as hunting? What would you say one of the biggest differences is?
Me personally, it's going to be hunting more public than private. Obviously, I'm not going to have that same level of access
sure.
That I would. And then just the opportunities are different. Up here, there's a lot more opportunity for upland hunting, probably some better opportunity for waterfowl than where I grew up at. I wouldn't say that, at least for this fall, I'm probably not going to do any Nebraska deer hunting just because I've got access back home, and I also didn't put in for any of our tags or anything like that. I haven't really scouted out any places to deer hunt out here, but yeah, just different opportunities and a different level of access than what I'm used to. So I'm going to have to do a lot more e-scouting, a lot more driving out to places and putting boots on the ground. And
there you go.
Instead of being familiar with the spot that I've been hunting the past 15 years or so. So
which still, always got to hold those spots in your heart, the places you got to hunt and have some great memories from. I mean, a whole bunch. So there's still time here in Nebraska. Folks, the other thing I would toss out there, if you're new to hunting or hunting in Nebraska, one of the things you might want to check out is the new effort, learnhunting.org, which is an adult new hunter page where you can connect with some hunter ed instructors and some of the people in this room, in fact, to get questions answered and feedback and thoughts and maybe even some time burning some powder and things like that. So check that out. That's learnhunting.org. But we're going to have to call it good for now. So make sure you give us a big thumbs up and subscribe. If you got some more comments or questions, make sure you list that down below. But enjoy, happy hunting, be safe. Until next time.
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.